Excellent. So if you are in this room, you are in the right place. We have this event, which we're most excited to start and to walk this journey with you. The event is building a financial model to sustain open waste banning, early warning systems for better governance, health, and sustainable livelihoods. Specifically, we are looking at showcasing the implementation of COP pledges and AMCEN resolution. AMCEN being the African Conference for Environment, for African Ministerial Conference for Environment. So we're looking to showcase how to realize the resolutions that come through that particular body. But also we are looking at how to leverage data and technology used in curbing or eliminating open waste banning and enhancing circularity. The event leads, I see them in the room. The event leads are Airtel, most welcome to Airtel, and thank you for hosting us, GSMA, and Nairobi City County Government. They are supported by various institutions, including UNEP, AMCEN, which is African Ministerial Conference for Environment, Stockholm Environment Institute, and Engineering X. My name is Andrea Nambandi. I'm the lead waste at Climate Champions, seconded to the Climate Champions from the Royal Academy of Engineering and Lloyd's Register Foundation. I always say that, but I've had many years of practicing, so it can roll off my tongue quite easily. The Climate Champions, importantly, bring the state and non-state actors together, and we are hoping that we are showcasing, in holding this session, we are showcasing that. So, how we shall proceed with this session is we've structured it very simply. And what we are trying to ensure is we're trying to elicit interactions with the various participants, but also elicit and ramp up actions, because what you're presenting is a pilot. So we shall start off with the opening remarks, and then we shall then proceed to a scene setting. There's somebody present to scene set for us. And then we'll have a panel discussion, and then question and answer session. And then I think what I want to encourage all the time is an interaction session, interactive session. What I mean is feel free to comment, input, ask, interrogate, because I feel in our hosts providing this venue have provided a very intimate space that can allow for that. So in the absence of the minister from Namibia, who I've been informed from her team that she's only arriving much later, I will give the opening remarks. So what I want to do actually, more than give opening remarks, is to give you a little bit of history. And I think I should have been a history student, because I do like history. So it is to tell you how we started and where we are, and perhaps that prepares us in discussing how we're going forward. So in 2019, in COP26 in Glasgow, very comfortably seated in my sitting room because I did not travel. I represented this virtually, but it was the first time open waste banning was on the global agenda. At the time, we partnered with ISWA, the International Solid Waste Association, Climate and Clean Air Coalition, World Health Organization, and we worked at highlighting the importance of open waste banning and enhancing waste management, sustainable waste management. Now, by the time we were getting to COP26, it was not done in a vacuum. This was preceded by a global scanning initiative. This global scanning was hosted by the Safer End to Engineering Life, which is with Engineering X, Lloyd's Register Foundation, and Royal Academy of Engineering. Now, hundreds of scientists came together and did an initial scanning and to find out what are the different challenges the globe is facing in terms of safety. And in this global scanning, they were able to identify the importance of safety, livelihoods, but more importantly, looking at the holistic approach to tackling waste mismanagement. So not present today, but Professor Desta and myself were then contacted and started work on the initiative, and we started working on open waste banning. So the open waste banning was domiciled through a partnership with the high-level climate champions, and we started off with Africa. Now we took the opportunity to having COP27 hosted in Africa for us to ramp up the ambitions that we had for the open waste banning initiative. Now, what we did with Professor Desta is to ensure that we have extensive consultation at first. Now, extensive consultation ensures that we are not just talking to ourselves and saying, this is how we're going to proceed. We need to identify the real challenge. So through the extensive consultation with non-state actors, firstly with youth groups, non-governmental organizations and civil society, academia, local government, but also state actors. Now, state actors, we went through the process of consulting through the diplomatic corps, the African diplomatic corps, but also we took the opportunity of the United Nations Environment Assembly at 5.2 to also consult with the state actors. But we are also very lucky and in strategizing and realizing working with AMCEN ensures that we're working with all environment ministers in Africa. So following the initial consultation, the immediate ask from the different state and non-state actors was we needed to understand what is the status of open waste banning in Africa. So that knowledge product didn't exist. So we set around to produce the first report to our knowledge on open waste banning. And what we did was to identify or frame it as challenges, but also opportunities, because it's very easy for us to always talk about challenges. But what about the opportunities that exist? This report was launched at AfriCities in Kisumu, and we had the forward from the two climate champions, that is Nigel and Dr. Mohamud. Now, I know we keep talking about climate champions, and I think as you wandered through different sessions, you'll realize we have all our jargon, and perhaps people don't really know what the climate champions are. So when you have COP hosted, the government appoints the state representative, most likely from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Ministry of Environment, but there's also the non-state representative, and that is normally the climate champion. So this year we have Her Excellency Razan and Dr. Mohamud, and previously we had Nigel. So those are the climate champions. So all of us work to support those climate champions so that the state and non-state actors start to work together towards the realization of limiting warming, because we realize not one stakeholder is sufficient to do that. Now, so I think I've walked you 2019, 2020, 2022. Now I'm at 2022. So at 2022, we had the opportunity to be part of the substantive agenda of African Ministerial Conference for Environment. What that means is that side events, of course, have their utility, but sometimes it's also good to be in the main agenda and presenting what you're proposing. And in this case, we worked towards a position paper to support a resolution for all environment ministers in Africa. And that went through, which means that the ministers, all environment ministers in Africa, agreed to work towards the elimination of open waste banning by the year 2040. And that was quite an accomplishment. But more than just a pledge or a resolution, they also recommended to have a vehicle to realize this resolution. And the vehicle is a multi-stakeholder partnership to eliminate open waste banning. And I guess this is why you're here, because that multi-stakeholder partnership has actually brought the different actors in the room. Now, once that happened in September, was it for September, Philip? September in 2022, we then had a chance to work towards the realization of the launch of the partnership, and that we did at COP27. And this was done with the AMCEN president, who was the Minister of Environment at the time from Senegal, and also representation from the local government, because we realize in elimination of open waste banning, it's not enough to just work with national government. You also need to work with city government and local government. So representation of both umbrella bodies from the AMCEN body and as well as the local governments through UCLG Africa. Now, we are sitting towards the end of 2023 at COP28, and we are happy to report the partnership is alive and well, and it includes, but not limited to, Royal Academy of Engineering, Engineering X through the Lloyd's Register Foundation, Climate Champions, UCLG Africa, ICLEI Africa, Climate and Clean Air Coalition, Stockholm Environment Institute, Practical Action, GAIO, Global Concrete and Cement Alliance, Airtel. And so we hope that in having this session, we are calling for more partnerships to join us. In 2023, we've been very busy operationalizing the multi-stakeholder partnership, because once you form the partnership, how are you going to get the work done? And in doing so, we realize institutionalization is really important. What that means is that we have now a secretariat of the partnership and a steering committee. Now, we've also had several working groups that we encourage you to follow and join. The working groups include the Messaging and Communications Working Group, come up with a common message for the multi-stakeholder partnership, and also a working group for monitoring and evaluation. Because the reason you expressed interest to join the multi-stakeholder partnership is most likely you already had events, or you had events planned in the future that included elimination of open waste banning and enhancing circularity. Now, the initiatives that will be presented in this session I hope that you'll be able to follow. They include regional maps that have been created through Climate and Clean Air Coalition, the open waste banning grantees, but most importantly, why we are here is the work of Airtel and partners in creating and proposing a sustainable business model towards elimination of open waste banning and creating a business model around that. So, without mouthful, I'd like to invite you now to the beginning of the session following the opening remarks. And following directly is to have Dr. Philip Osano do the scene setting. And the reason we wanted to do this is just to bring us all on the same table on where we are on this open waste banning and elimination of open waste banning. So Dr. Philip Osano, I know for a number of years. This is the Stockholm Environment Institute. He is the director for the African Center. And Dr. Philip Osano has an interest in environmental policy, development, and international affairs. He's also an environmental expert with the diverse research portfolio, including biodiversity and ecosystems. I usually say that no sooner do I work with somebody than I convert them into an air pollution enthusiast or expert. So Philip has been converted duly, and he's here to do the scene setting. Most welcome, Philip.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Andriana, for the introduction. So I'm here because before we go to the substantive agenda, we need, when you talk about climate, we need science. So the Stockholm Environment Institute has been providing the scientific basis that underpins all the action that we are doing, especially when you look at the issue of waste management and open waste banning. And I think I'm just having 5 points to say as part of the scene setting. Number one is that we know that 9 out of 10 people globally are exposed to bad air pollution. And we know the key sources: transport, industry, energy, and waste management. When you go to developing countries, particularly urban areas, open waste banning is a big issue, and that's one of the reasons why we are bringing this partnership together. Number two is when we look at outdoor air pollution. Normally we tend to separate indoor air pollution and outdoor air pollution, but when you look at outdoor air pollution, we know that certain parts of the world, particularly Africa, parts of Asia and Latin America, have very low monitoring systems. So we don't as much understand the level of pollution. So this gaps is one of the reasons that we are feeling with this kind of partnership. And later on, our colleague, Sean Khan from UNEP, I think will talk a little bit about that. Number three is something that is important, is that air pollution affects health. And there's very little appreciation of the health burden on air pollution. When we look at countries, we do a lot of work in Africa, for example. Up to 1 million people die every year because of air pollution. And that's not really something that the policymakers have appreciated. So we need to then bring all the reason why we are doing all this work is, of course, to make sure that we know that the health burden of air pollution is very high, and we need to pay attention to it. Number four, people think, why do you talk about air pollution on a climate event or a climate action? And that's something that I always say, that there's a very strong connection between air pollution and climate change. First is that many of the sources of air pollution are also the source of greenhouse gases, which are earth-warming gases. Some of them, like methane, most of you might have had, both pollutants and also greenhouse gases. So there's that connection both in terms of sources, but that means that if you then take action to address air pollution, at the same time, in some cases, you also take action to limit emission of greenhouse gases, especially in waste dam sites. Methane is a big problem in waste dam sites, but there are also other gases, nitrogen dioxide, and many other pollutants that we address. So having talked about those four things, I can now set the scene, and I'm setting the scene by saying that we need to have a science, policy, practice, and bridge that gap. And this is actually why we're bridging this gap. So thank you, of course, to Airtel, GSMA, and Nairobi County, because we have started a partnership which is actually catalyzing these three areas. So we have worked a lot with Nairobi County government to actually set up a baseline for air pollution for monitoring. So we have a baseline currently around all the sources of emissions, and we have actually up to about 60 air pollution monitors across different parts of the city. Number two, then we work with the county to develop an air pollution act and air pollution policy. That's one of the few cities in Africa, for example, that has both an act and policy. But number three, now we need to move to practice, and I think that's where Airtel comes in, because with Airtel now we are seeing how can we set up a model where the data that we get from the sensors can be then channeled and relayed to different users, because different users have different needs. And we're piloting monitoring in one of the largest dump sites. But we also see that, when we talk to the health community, the medical community, they have different needs around what kind of information they want. The public has different needs. One of the other cases that I give examples are the sports community. So now we also work with the sports community, because whenever we have sports events, many of you know that Kenya is a top athletic country, but athletes can run in the polluted air. So they always have to know what is the status of air pollution in the stadiums, if we're having marathons and so on. So there are different user needs that need this data. And so I think the partnership that we are setting up would help us develop a business model that brings together the public sector, in this case, of course, city authorities, the private sector, for example, in this case, Airtel, the scientific community, in this case, the Stockholm Environment Institute, as well as the high-level champions and other partners, and of course, scale this up, and that's why we have UNEP and other partners. So I would just end there and just say that I'm looking forward. I'll also be the panel, so a lot of other discussion will pick up during the panel session. Thank you so much, and most welcome. Bye.
Thank you very much, Philip. And indeed, we are really looking forward to understanding how you can scale this, because the reason you have pilots is maybe you need a proof of concept, but you also need to understand how all this links together. But beyond that, it is important, because if we're going to get to the goals that we need to get for climate change and ensure that we have clean air for all, and ensure that people have access to very basic services where in the rest of the world they do have, but not some regions, then it is not enough to have 11 institutions. It's quite remarkable to do so in that short time that we have. But to scale that up, not only to the entire continent, not the institutions we are working with, but for all institutions, for all people. So to do so, then we need to have this kind of partnerships ramped up and, forgive the use of this, but, with really accelerated fueling these different actions. So without much ado, I'd like to start with convening the panelists who are already here in the audience. And I'll start off with the first panelist, Mr. Dimeji. Now, I met Mr. Dimeji this year for the first time, and I have to say, I watched him move from session to session at the Africa Climate Summit. It's very rare that you have somebody from the private sector at his level dedicating all that time through the week to attend all the different sessions, following very closely. So Mr. Dimeji is very passionate and having joined us. So I'll just start off with saying he has been the head of strategy and sustainability in 2023. He is responsible for leading strategic business-wide initiatives, including innovation, strategic investment, operational efficiencies, and partnerships focused on sustainability and education. In addition, he is also responsible for delivering Airtel's Africa Group-wide sustainability program. So, Mr. Dimeji, please step forward. And then asking to join Mr. Dimeji is Christina. Christina is actually right here at the front, so it's just one leap away. Christina has kindly agreed to be in this panel, and Christina is the co-founder of Yunus Environment Hub. Together with Professor Mohammed Yunus, they actually co-founded this hub. So The hub develops social business solutions that tackle environmental and climate crises. The expertise of the hub and the network covers waste and plastic management, circular economy, carbon neutrality, biodiversity, afforestation, sustainable agriculture, clean energy, and access to clean water. So Christina is going to have to add clean air to that as well, because as I said, when you work with me, I soon convert you. So Christina, please come forward. Most welcome. So Sean, Sean is another convertee. I met Sean when I was still a student, so you have to think this is many moons ago. And I had an initial conversation with Sean, and I walked away thinking, I don't know if that was an interview or just a conversation. I was a little bit confused, but it was a conversation that was over coffee, and it went on for longer than 2 hours. And it was about air quality work in Africa. So Sean started his career in the private sector as an electrical engineer. And I like to say that Sean really at heart is a tinkerer. So maybe that's what all electronic engineers are. Since joining UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, Sean has worked across several capacities, mainly in project design, implementation, coordination, in JEF, focusing on technology and information and knowledge management in the international waters. He has later led the development and rollout of UNEP's project management, reporting, and accountability tool. In 2015, which is shortly before I met him, Sean headed the air quality monitoring program for UNEP and started this year as the head of GCF coordination office at UNEP. Welcome, Sean. Yeah, anywhere. And last but not least, Philip is already part of I've already introduced Philip. So without much ado, you can either join now or later. It's up to you. I feel like we're playing musical chairs, so it's all very good. Okay, so with this panel established, I would like to invite for us to interact with the panel, and I have some guiding questions, but really just take the questions as guiding questions, which means interact with it, let's play with it, let's interrogate, and this is the whole point of us establishing this very esteemed panel. So the first question I have actually is for Philip, and this is on the basis of the work that Stockholm Environment Institute does on the science policy interface, but also the work that you're conducting on circular economy. So Philip, when you look at the circular economy governance, what exists in terms of elimination of open waste banning, and how can we take this opportunity to look at ways to translate science to policy action? Go ahead, Philip. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Because I talked, I'll be very brief, but I'll say two things. Because I know you are to have Governor Sakaja here from Nairobi County. Moving from linear to circular economy. So in Kenya, last year, the parliament passed Sustainable Waste Management Act. And that Sustainable Waste Management Act provides for several things. One is really to sensitize the public and institutions to really start to sort out the waste at source. Number two is to set up infrastructure for waste management, because part of the challenge that we have, poor waste management is the breakdown in infrastructure. So from collecting, aggregating, sorting, recycling, and so on, that infrastructure needs to be set up. And that's really a key role for the private sector. Because we have a federal-like system of governance, the county governments, which are the subnational entities like Nairobi County, then have to develop their own waste management act at that level. So the Nairobi County, as part of responding to climate change, has now both a climate change act and a climate change action plan to 2050. And that action plan actually has a strong element around waste management to reduce emission from waste management. Number two, of course, then I just want to highlight that public awareness and education is very important. And that public awareness and education would then help to change behavior, because part of what we see is that in neighborhoods where you don't have the infrastructure, it is very easy to have people just do open waste banning because they actually have no alternative. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Philip. And I think it's important to understand, in the absence of any services available, people burn waste. I don't think anybody wants to walk out of their house and burn waste, because this is the one issue that, as we did consultation, that everybody could identify with. That sometimes people think that this only happens perhaps in poorer neighborhoods or in the informal settlements, but I can assure you that is an issue that you can find in all kinds of neighborhoods. And so then with that, thank you so much, Philip. I would like to invite Dimeji. And what I want Dimeji to speak to is the role of private sector businesses, specifically telecoms. You've been developing and supporting implementation of sustainable waste management and circular economy. Now, can you speak to what Airtel has been doing in this consideration, especially given your big footprint in Africa, your operations, your networks, and your supply chains of the businesses that you work with? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. So Airtel is a telecoms company in Africa. We operate in 14 countries in Africa, and 14 countries in which we operate in have a population footprint of about 600 million people. And one of the things we're very proud about is that we have about 150 million people across these 14 countries that are actually subscribers and actually have to make a call on a day-to-day basis on our network. And that's something we're extremely proud of, because what we're doing ultimately is empowering them from a digital inclusion perspective. As a corporate citizen, we believe there are two responsibilities as it relates, obviously, to open waste burning. First of all is that we as a corporate citizen, we're very particular about minimizing our footprint in terms of the waste we put out there, or ensuring that any waste that we produce, because we typically produce quite a bit of e-waste. A lot of our networks is obviously based on electronics. So I'll talk about two things. First, as a corporate citizen, what we're doing and how we're then also now partnering as part of the multi-stakeholder program to also ensure that the communities in which we serve, we're also, being a good corporate citizen. So we have a sustainability strategy, which is fully embedded and drives our commercial strategy. And this was launched about 2.5 years ago. It's based on 4 pillars. I'll talk about 2 pillars, environment and community. And those obviously are the most 2 important pillars for us. From a climate perspective, we're very clear that we want to minimize the footprint of our activities from a climate perspective. And that's one of the first areas we've started. So from a waste perspective, what I'm happy to say today is that none of the waste that we generate goes to an open dump or would ever end up in a fire pit that is not part of the official protocol for how you deal with waste. So what we've done across all our markets, we've partnered with recycling companies. So every waste we generate is ultimately picked up by a recycling company and is efficiently disposed of. The other thing we've done, because we obviously do have some leverage, the equipment in which we purchase today, we're moving away to equipment that has significantly longer shelf life. And by using equipment that obviously has longer shelf life, you're reducing the amount of waste you're pushing out there. So we're very particular about moving away from technology that will, be only available for 2 or 3 years to technology or equipment that we're able to use for a longer period. And that ultimately obviously reduces the waste we're putting out there. There is a reality. We've typically used, for a lot of our sites, we've used lead-based batteries to power those sites sometimes, or to use that as, backup systems. One of the things we've also done as a corporate citizen is we've made a very clear stand to move away from lead-based batteries to lithium-based batteries. Lithium-based batteries tend to have about a 50% better footprint in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reduction versus lead-based batteries. So what we're doing is all new projects are based on a lithium-based battery now, and all our sites where we have a lead-based battery, as they're aging and we're taking them out, we're ensuring that we're replacing them with lithium batteries. And so what that essentially does is that we're significantly reducing the hazardous waste which we're putting out there. And that's obviously what we're doing from a company perspective to reduce the waste, as I said, we put out there. Now, there's also a reality. We operate in economies or in communities where, as Adriana said, they really don't have a choice. Many of them, just by cultural practice or because there's lack of infrastructure, continue to dump waste, in pits close by, or, they burn the waste. And we obviously are very honored to be part of this partnership. And what we've done working with the team is we've got thousands of towers all over these 14 countries. So all the communication we do has to go through a tower. And what we've done is we've provided those access to the team to put air quality monitoring equipment on those towers. We're not yet there. We've just started. We just started the pilot phase. So there's currently a pilot going on in Kenya, I believe with 2 or 3 sites. But we're eagerly excited that, once we get the proof of concept, this is something we'll be happy to roll out within Kenya and ultimately expand this to the other countries in which we operate. So it's equipment, it's on our tower. We're supplying the power to that equipment. And obviously, because you need connectivity to be able to read the information from the equipment to any offsite location, to the cloud where the information is stored, we're also supporting with that as well on that. So I'll just stop there. And obviously, we have other people who want to contribute, but that's what we're doing But let me just summarize this ultimately. For us, partnerships, collaboration, I think we believe is key to this. It's key to solving this. This is not a problem for just governments and the municipality. This is a problem that has to be solved with multi-stakeholder partnership. This is civil societies, researchers, the scientists who understand this, the people who will provide the solutions for this. And that's why, as I said, we're part of this partnership.
Thank you very much. And I think for me, what I am absolutely excited about is that what he's mentioned as well, 150 million people. So I want you to think of that, because when we talk about air pollution, air quality, unlike waste management, we can speak to not meeting 150 million people, but yet in this partnership, we're looking at meeting 150 million people and looking at a network that already exists. And I think Sean is looking at me because perhaps he can challenge that 150 million and add another 150 million. But before we come to you, Sean, I'd like to go to Christina. Christina, there is a significant financial and infrastructure gap in the management of waste and enhancing circularity in developing countries. At the same time, because I don't like to only dwell on the negative, there's ample opportunities for small to medium-sized enterprises to curb waste mismanagement and eliminate open waste burning. In your experience, how would youth in Africa go about accessing financing and investment to tap into these opportunities? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Let me give you a brief overview of what we do at UNOS Environment Hub. The core, so the vision of our organization is to achieve a world of 3 zeros: zero poverty, zero unemployment, and zero net carbon emissions. And what we do is we empower the youth to become job givers instead of job seekers. So we train them, we inspire them to become entrepreneurs. And to be very specific, we're talking about social business entrepreneurship. Trying to build socially inclusive business models that are addressing a societal challenge and creating benefit to the broader community. And in our programs, we work with a lot of them who offer waste management solutions in providing waste collection services, the sorting, the aggregation, and so on. But if we want to achieve zero waste and zero open burning, the best waste is actually the one that is not being created. So a lot of our focus is on the upstream innovation, in helping people and organizations to design circular business models where you prevent waste in the first place. And this can come through many different levers on looking at that you're providing a service as a product. And you're not selling the product anymore, but offering as a service, keeping control over the product itself and how it's being delivered. You can take it back. You can remanufacture, reuse the parts that have been part of that product. The same also looking at circular supply chains and how you're sourcing the materials for your business, and working there with, be it in waste as an input or trying to leverage sort of what has been in both the technical and the biological cycle on keeping materials longer in the value chain. And many other examples that all sort of lead to the product life extension of materials and preventing them to become waste. And for example, in Kenya, we have trained 1,500 women who are solopreneurs. Some of them might have a small business. Sometimes they have 1 or 2 employees, and they work across many different sectors, many in the agribusiness sector, manufacturing sector, and so on. And we have trained them on business capacity skills plus circular economy, because this was a very new topic for them. They all know about recycling or what waste management is, but the topic of circular economy was new to them. And this is sort of the bottom-up innovation that we think is needed on really creating this change to a transition from a linear to a circular economy, where we are reducing waste, and specifically plastic waste, because we know with the current statistics and the trends that the plastic production at the current speed will not be able to manage, even if we manage to provide waste management services to the entire population. Right now, half of the world's population does not have access to proper waste management services. And even if we would provide it, it would not be possible to sort of tackle this balance of waste. So the priority really needs to be on the reduction of waste. And then in the second step, the proper management in order to keep it out of the environment. And through our programs, we, as I said, we work a lot with young people who are very excited about these topics, who also see waste management as a challenge in their community, and they come up, they have very creative ideas and solutions. And access to finance is a major challenge for them, not only from the perspective not having the connection to a funder, but actually understanding on what are the different types of funding that are available and what are the requirements for them to access that. And this is where we also come in with our programs, where we help them to understand what it means to be investor ready, what it means, the different sources of funding, even if it's a grant, and helping them to understand sort of what are the different types of documents that a funder or investor would look into, and helping them, preparing them sort of for these conversations. Sometimes it's not even the document, but really helping them to understand what type of questions that funder will ask, and helping them for these conversations. So that's kind of like the role that we are playing in building the capacities on the entrepreneur side, and at the same time also being the bridge to funders and investors, providing the platform and the spaces for them.
Thank you very much. And I think we'll be remiss not to mention that for informality within the waste management space and circularity, I think a lot of us occupy spaces where we know that all the waste management services that are provided in our countries is provided through the informal sector, including the recycling that is done. And yet when we come to these rooms, then we forget that the informal sector indeed is the one that is providing these services. And if you're going to transition to a circular economy, they need to be central. At the same time, acknowledging that youth and women need to be central to this plan of transitioning to circular, inclusive waste management practices. And so I'm very happy, Christina, that you are actually bringing this forward. And I think what I do know is that when we did have the consultation, and including the representation through GAIO, who is the Green Africa Youth Organization, we had a session where we had an elimination of open waste banning with the youth constituencies. And I remember that it was a session of about an hour and a half, and we had over 100 youths join that session. And the excitement was around business opportunity and employment opportunities, and already understanding innovation and technologies at the heart of it, but already proposing very valid solutions. So the question is, how can we move from those rooms to seeing that in practice and accessing that finance? So Christina has already put that forward, and I hope that this session actually elicits more participation and collaboration in that area. And so last but not least, Sean, when you look at the opportunities and challenges, are there some that come primarily from the intersection of waste, agriculture, energy, climate change, and air pollution? Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Adriana, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. Folks, I'm in a different capacity, but my passion has been for air pollution. And being an engineer, I tend to think problem and solutions. And so maybe later on today, I'll have a chance to show you some of these, I'm going to call them experiments. And that's what motivated me to come here today. I think there are quite a few intersects. The twist in this is, how do we scale these ideas? How do we, and I think if we can scale with the right model, we can attract the finance and to sustain and grow this. For most of the things we've done in UNEP, because we're grant-based, you know, we do these handouts, the projects come to an end, we have really elaborate sustainability plans in those proposals, and then we move on to the next one. And that really bothers me, and that is in part why I moved to the capacity and now is to see how we can bring about this nexus between air and climate. I was really delighted, we haven't met before, to see that Airtel is looking to build up infrastructure, which these developing countries really need. And I'll talk a little bit about this later on, but if we can crack that model to, I put it really bluntly, to make money, I think we can crack about 80% of the problem. And if we can bring in the elements of youth into this, if we can bring in elements of technology and infrastructure, which Airtel has and comms, I think we have a good part of the equation figured out. What we haven't been able to do is come up with that business model. I mean, I know you have the corporate social responsibilities, but ultimately you need to make revenue. I can't speak for the children, but if they're entrepreneurs that you're growing, ultimately they need to create businesses. And I think if we can put that together, and I'm being a bit repetitive because it's so important, I think we're there. And hopefully out of this discussion and maybe in the presentations, we can get more clarity in that.
Thank you very much. So I see that Digimamo has just joined us, and I'm going to ambush him. So that means that he's never going to join any other meeting I invite him to. But Digimamo, the reason I acknowledge you is, of course, this pilot that is being put forward is being conducted in Kenya. And he's representing the National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, and he's the Director General. So I would like to just ambush, if you just allow me, just to make a comment around waste management and the initiatives that the country is putting forward, which are quite far sighted, and these partnerships that you're proposing. So just pass on the microphone and to DG NEMA.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, my name is Mamo, Director General NEMA.
You have to be in the camera.
No. Okay. Good. I think in Kenya we have had a number of regulation on waste management. We started with 2006 waste management regulation. That was essentially to look at solid waste management, because the challenge we had in all the 47 counties is waste management. As a regulator, our job is to ensure that we have a clean, healthy, and secure environment in our country, which was also a provisional constitution under Article 43 of our Constitution 2010, which gave Kenyans the right to live in a clean, healthy, and secure environment. My job as a regulator was to ensure that we provide that vision for the country. All the 47 counties, I said the challenge was waste management. People like throwing things out and expecting a regulator or a government agency to work on waste management. Waste ideally is everyone's responsibility. As a government, we provided the necessary legislation and environment that makes it possible for the citizens to participate in the waste management issues. After 2006 regulation, in 2010, when we had the new constitution, we came up with a national strategy for solid waste management, where we provided 10 minimum points for the county governments to manage waste from the point of generation, point of source, transportation to disposal, so that we transition from linear waste management, where you just use, utilize, and throw away the waste, and we had lots of dumping sites all over. So we are to transition this from linear waste management to circular model, where we drive value out of the waste as a resource. Waste is a resource. So as a regulator, we have to talk to the citizens, informing them, or rather telling them that waste is a resource. That is why, as a country, last year, our parliament passed Sustainable Solid Waste Management Act, which essentially means counties need to come up with what we call material recovery facilities. Instead of all the waste getting into the dump site, we have to put up material recovery facilities. And if you look at the general waste stream, 60% of the municipal waste is organic waste. So if we manage, or we can manage 60% of the waste, then essentially we'll be able to manage 60% of the municipal waste, meaning only 40% can be looked after, because 20% is recyclables and 10% is other waste, including electronic waste. So as a country, we've put up enough legislation in place. What is remaining is for the citizens to take action to ensure that, as we put up those material recovery facilities, they participate in the management of waste, which is everyone's responsibility. We've even thought of separating the waste at the household level, so that very little waste gets into the dumping site. We do not have landfills yet in our country. We are still managing the dumping sites. The new act needs to transition us now to circular waste management, where we need to come up with landfills instead of having dumping sites. I thank you.
Thank you very much. So before you go anywhere, DJ Mamo, I wanted to give Sean, who's been waiting all along for you, and I heard that you met yesterday somewhere within the corridors. No worries. And so I want to give Sean an opportunity, and he has a presentation PowerPoint slide that I would like for them to put up. But Sean, data is often a challenge for clean air, and more so in developing regions. There is room for partnership innovation to bridge the data gap in air quality management. Could you share your experience and identify opportunities for financing and investment for clean air actions? Thank you. It's for you.
Oh, God. I think I don't have a straight answer for you on that one, but I think if we look at all the statistics on air pollution and health, for example, it's very depressing, because I can quote, 7 million a year and 650,000 children, and yet the budget to tackle air and health is embarrassing. So looking at a strategy, if you can make the linkage between air and climate, we tap into a very fat envelope. And I think unpacking that, whether it's looking at the agricultural sector, whether it's looking at landfills and how we manage emissions from those.
Your slides are up.
Oh, I thought that was another mic.
And you can come here if it's easier.
I think that's probably one avenue, and I would be personally delighted to work with you on ideating that. So I pulled this together this morning. There may be mistakes in it, so I apologize. Just some quick stats. this may be a little bit dated, but the gray part just says we have no data. The green part says you're on track, but okay. But what comes across here when we look at waste management, where is it? I can't see it. Is most of it is red or orange. So we got plans, but we're not really sure how to implement that. And I think that's a big part of what we need to focus on in moving this forward, as well as getting the data to be able to manage this. Now, I pointed this way or this way? Okay, so I think the computer's over there, right? Which way do I point it? This way, right? Okay. So just some real quick takeaways from this study that we had done. About 33% of the countries that have plans can actually implement them. Most countries don't have monitoring. So this is not about Africa, this is globally. 75% of the countries don't have an air quality management strategy in place. So there's quite a bit of work to happen there. And I said in my introductory remarks, if we can monetize this whole approach, I think we're going to get there. So one of the things I came up with in my previous position, which was responsible for monitoring air quality, trying to tackle this was this whole notion of partnership, right? Pulling together science, private sector, doing your usual, run-of-the-mill projects, with capacity building, awareness, and so on. But really, the gist of it was to innovate. Try something. If it works, see how we can scale it up. And so we started this in Nairobi because that's where we're headquartered, with the county some years back. Here in this example, it's where we used low-cost sensors, which at the time were really controversial, and we positioned them in the business district. And the polar plots at the bottom is your before, during, and after. During is when we shut the street down, we closed it to traffic. And so you can very clearly see that before we did anything, business as usual, it's all red and yellow. That indicates higher levels of concentration. When we closed the streets, you can see that it was reduced, and then reopening it back again, the red starts to show up. And this has been one tool that we've experimented with and evolved over time. We actually did some work, which I'll show you a little bit, with Airtel's competitor. I won't say who that is. We went on to work with the Athletics Federation, looking at athlete. And Philip, thanks for mentioning this. It was in my slide. I was delighted we were in the same wavelength. And actually, a good outcome have come from this experiment to host an international game, I think, starting 2027, with the Athletics Federation. You have to guarantee the quality of the air. And so that was something that was born out of their sustainability plan and this collaboration with UNEP. When we launched this program back in 2016, this is kind of how Africa looks like. And then as of this morning, this is how it looks. And what I wanted to draw your attention to is a couple of things on technology. The purples, do I have the, anyways, the purples is where you're way beyond WHO limits, right? It's considered hazardous, and that's Asia. By the way, this is a snapshot at that point in time, and this is a real-time platform. Your reds and your greens, and this is updated every hour. It's capturing data to sort of give an estimate of what pollution looks like in that locality. And if I were to go back and refresh that, and I may have an opportunity to do that in a minute, it will look different. But as we continued with this, and this is zooming in on Africa, you can see other pieces of data. We're combining satellite data with ground measurements, picking up flares to show where there are fires. And what you can see here are these screens here, which is the real-time prevailing winds. And you can see in some cases where it's red and there's a fire. And then if you see this in the animated version, you can see the dispersion of that pollution in another country coming across. And we went on to do more stuff. So that's the example I was just talking about. There are fires up there, and then you can see, you can't really make it out. Yeah, you can see sort of the reddish, orangish colors because of the influence. But what we went on to do is layer this with population density. And so that's the white part. That's without population density, and that's the layer with the population. And you can see where people live and where the populations are more dense. And this is useful because it can help us in planning. It can help us in infrastructure development and those policies around it. What I missed to show you here is on the left-hand side of the same platform, we have about 26 or whatever, between 26 and 40,000 measurement points. It just depends because it's real time at the time of day. Maybe some are turned off. But we also have the population data, and we're able to tell which segments are being affected at that time, globally or in a particular country. And it's interesting because you look at Asia and your segments most influenced or being affected by pollution are 40 plus. You look in Africa and it's your below 19 years. And there are reasons for that, the localities in cities and so on. Going deeper into this to the ground, of course, it's real time. You can click on any one of the measurement points and see what it looks like over the last 24 hours and who the source of the data is. And we've used that, and this is a before after of a street in Nairobi. And this is the part that irritates me, right? Because I'm talking about a street in Nairobi. It's not going to change the world. I need a region or a sub-region in Africa. That would be more exciting. But anyways, this is a success because we use the same set of ideas showing the before, during, and after effect to sort of, and this is with partnerships with SCI, with UN Habitat, JICA, and so on, to take a street that was a pickpocket street, dirty, on paved road, and implement, what we try to have it in no non-motorized zone, but we got it to one-way traffic, walkways for citizens and so on, and it basically revived that particular avenue. And what you have now is a situation where the neighboring shopkeepers are saying, hey, why don't you guys come do this here too, because business is booming on that one. We've gone on to take this infrastructure and try to package information, get out to citizens. And this was a complete failure. It was a success in terms of getting them up on the billboards and working with the advertising companies to beam this real time. But it was a failure because in this example, it says the air is moderate. And to the guy in the street, especially in Africa, they have no clue what that means. And so it was a challenge because I went back to the US EPA that came up with this labeling. And I said, what exactly do you mean by moderate or sensitive? There's another level up where it says sensitive for moderate for sensitive groups. Well, yeah, I'm a sensitive guy, but what does that mean to the guy in the street? What we learned is that the way we communicate health impacts, it's got to be broken down to hot and cold, good and bad. That's what people on the street are bothered by. The one in Ethiopia, and this is one example I want to show you. Again, it irritates me because I'm talking about one particular place. I want it to be the whole continent. With the sensor we had in the stadium as part of that collaboration with Athletics Federation, the Ethiopian government banned medium-sized trucks coming through the city. What we were able to show to be able to reinforce that policy decision is that your peaks went down, right? So this was preliminary data at the time. This is an old slide, but I thought I'd put it in here because you can be able to show how measurement can support policy and hopefully encourage the actions around that. I don't know why this is here again, but I will stop there. Thank you very much. I wanted an opportunity to show you the system live. If this time, okay. No, okay, I'm not allowed to do that. It's not possible.
All right. So I have another set of questions, but before I do that, I think I want to give you an opportunity to interact with the panelists as they are. Yes, absolutely. So please go ahead and put any questions you have from the floor to the panelists. And I see the hands going up in plenty. Michael, you have a question?
So I think
Microphone.
I think mine is more of a comment rather than a question, and it's something that we've been that we've been pondering upon as a private sector. So maybe Sean, I know we've worked together a bit more in the past on this, but I wanted to see what kind of incentives can we have for private sector to actually invest in this, because when we go into the boardrooms and images here, normally people would ask, what is the business case for this investment? I know it's important for health, for environment, but what kind of incentives can there, what kind of incentives can be offered to private sector to actually invest in it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I think that one I will give to DG Mamo, perhaps, to speak to, how we can create a good business environment, enabling environment for the different kind of partnerships that we're putting here forward. And in doing so, DG Mamo, you'll be giving that as also a closing remark. Thank you.
thank you. I don't know whether this question is related to waste management or air quality.
Both.
Gender. Thank you. I think the challenge we have in waste management generally for private sector is how a private sector can come on board, especially coming up with a recycling facility, supporting recycling facility. The major issue is, for example, looking at the PET bottles. If we can put value on a PET bottle so that it can be picked from the environment, then taken to a recycling facility and creating green jobs for the youth, then I'm sure that will really entice the private sector to come on board. Waste management is a big enterprise. If we look at opportunities provided, both legislative, regulatory, because currently even our regulatory space has really been modeled in such a way that private sector are coming on board, because things like EPR, extended producer responsibility, are private sector driven. And government is really working closely with private sector to ensure that we create the necessary environment for private sector to thrive. Maybe I think that is okay.
Michael, I would throw the question back to you. What I didn't speak about is if Airtel were to build up this infrastructure for monitoring, and having engaged with the county, so you're federal, but the county, they want to be able to put in place a mechanism for compliance. And I can see, because these are real-time systems, I can see a situation where revenue is being generated because you can detect at that point that there's burning happening in this place and so on. I can see it being used for congestion management, traffic congestion management, as it's done in some other places. And so the business case for you, I would think, there are people that are asthmatic and they have cell phones. That infrastructure could generate revenue in terms of being able to send out notices to those subscribers for a fee, to forecast, because I didn't talk about it, but these systems forecast and can be personalized because it's on your phone, right? So I think if you ideate or brainstorm around this, there are many cases to be made in terms of how you'd use monitoring infrastructure. And the private sector, I think, has a big part to play in that, because I think there's a space in terms of even on data management that can be used for a lot of things. We're talking about air pollution, but in every single one of your microwave antennas, there's a humidity sensor. So if in the same platform we were able to capture that, can you imagine for a minute what you could do? You could forecast where it's going to rain at what we say hyperlocal, at a level, like many times the weatherman says it's going to rain today and it's like scorching hot. Maybe it's raining somewhere else. You could actually deliver forecasts that are highly accurate because it's at a local level, at a really local level. There's so much scope, I think, in terms of the business case, because you would charge for that, right? I can go on and think about this, but I think if you were to think through this, I am really convinced that we could pull together a project, possibly through the GCF, that looks at these mechanisms, and they're welcoming the private sector, they're welcoming government into putting together something that is fundable, but something that we can sustain because it has a business case. I think it's a very important question. But I'm looking at you guys to tell us how you gonna make money out of this.
But just to add on this one also, next year we are rolling out as a country vehicular emission testing. And we will be coming up with testing centers, like 19, 20 testing centers. And we want to model it around PPP so that we have private public sector engagement. And these are run by private sector guys other than government running it as a business. Thank you.
Dimeji, final words?
There was actually a response to Sean's question.
No
I
worries.
think it's a bit too early at this point to believe that people would pay for this kind of information. I think there is a reality of the economic situation in Africa. And I'm bringing this down to Africa. I'm talking specifically because that's obviously the market. That's obviously the market in which we operate. I think there's a reality. I mean, if you look at the GDP numbers across Africa, there is a reality about just how many people can afford to pay for another subscription service to tell them that the air quality is good today or is bad today. There are a lot of things they're dealing with. I think at the beginning you said it, we haven't cracked it. There's still some work that has to be done around how do you come up with a business model that is efficient and rewards everybody, all the partners. But to think that one partner can build the system and monetize it, I'm not too sure we're there.
No, you're right, and
I'm not too sure.
I don't agree with
yet.
you. I don't agree with you.
Sorry?
I don't agree with you. But I'm not saying, and I might have miscommunicated.
Sorry.
Not
Sorry,
one
just
partner.
before-
Hold
just
on,
before-
gentlemen.
sorry.
Because we have.
I know. And there's something I
Who knew
wanted to
that?
add, because he's here. He manages a waste resource. You have all this equipment, satellites, tons of equipment. You pick up 16 fires or flares in a rural county in Kenya. And I really want us to be honest. Do you think the agencies today have the capability to go into those counties and ask people to pay fines?
Before you respond to that, I think now we've run out of time, and I thought they've given us so much time, but I'm happy that this is getting exciting. And I think if you were listening keenly for the 1.5 hours and you missed what Sean said, for me, I propose we take this forward because we have an opportunity through GCF, and we have the coordinator here who is also a champion for clean air and has been for a while, integrating air pollution and climate change and waste. There's an opportunity. So let us not come here or at least meet in a different country for COP29 and not have a proposal at hand in working towards realizing this business model that we're proposing. So with that, I would like to thank all my panelists and my participants and for the enthusiastic session, and wish you all the best for your COP28 and hope to run into you in the corridors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adriana.
We're going to have to be
Keep them out.
realistic about-
Thank you so much. Really.